Okay, let's call the meeting to order. Announcement, first of all, welcome BJ, our new director.
So we'll be welcome to BJ, and a huge thank you to Ivan, who leaves his last day, and I'd like to thank you for your direction and help and service, and wish you the very best in all your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Yeah, we will miss you. So
It's been an honor and a privilege. Thank you very much. And still, thank you for your service, and encourage you to excel still more.
Thank you. So, approval of minutes. We need a motion.
Second.
Sean.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Approval of addendum or supplemental agenda, we don't have either. So we can move on to statements from the public on agenda items. Our first statement is from Richard Nelson, speaking on the subject matter of landfill closure and sort station.
Would you like me to sit there, or is it like if I stand?
I think it's easier if you sit and you're just closer to the microphone.
Okay, fine.
That way, record.
Good morning, Madam
Good morning.
Commissioners. Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you for a few moments. My name is Richard Nelson. I have also served as a commissioner on the American Energy. Part of that job was to identify ways to conserve energy, create the energy. The landfill fell into that category for me in a sense. I want to put this comment in context. This was something that I organized in the year 2005. This was a meeting on the landfill issue then. We felt it was critical to find a solution for use of the sort station and reduction of the landfill size. We convened this panel discussion. So you can see that way back then, it was a very hot topic for this community. And shortly after that, I started a mission to identify and locate companies with technologies suitable for this community so that we could reduce our landfill size, reduce what we were putting into the landfill, and increase our potential for creation of energy. In that attempt, I met a company called Waste Refinement, located in Nevada and in Michigan. I developed a relationship with them over a period of time. They're a company that uses a technology called pyrolysis. It is a non-burn process for converting 200 tons of organic waste daily into a product called biochar. Biochar is an organic substance that is a soil amenity for food sustainability. I don't know if many of you know this, but we have years and years of sugarcane production, pineapple production in the States, depleted the qualities of the soils. Such food sustainability and food production is an important aspect of our community. I felt that this might fit in well versus or along with waste to energy technologies. I have taken several tours of waste to energy facilities. Our H-Power facility in Honolulu just added another $350 million facility onto it. It's able to disintegrate refrigerators whole in a matter of instance. It's impressive, but they have tons and tons of toxic ash that they have to deal with on a daily basis, and that goes back into the landfill. The Hilo Landfill is, through the good graces of our health department, has been extended year after year after year. The site steepened, the base broadened. It's extremely high. When Waste Refinement came to the island in 2011, we did a presentation to the County Council's Environmental Management Committee, then chaired by Ms. Smart, Councilwoman Smart. What we did was we presented the plan to the county. Our idea was to take 100% of all the organics out of the waste stream. We were planning to use what was then an empty sort station that had sat empty for several years. When we went to photograph the sort station to make sure it was suitable for operations, it was being used as a spray loop for Payne County trucks. It wasn't being used as a sort station, and we had a wonderful facility. Our company offers us $60 million to improve the sort station, put in a very sophisticated sort, not raking rubbish around the floors, but literally doing it in a very good way, using flotation, using a variety of technologies that we use for separation of metals, plastics, and other organic debris. So our proposal was to the county that we needed no contribution from the public of the island. We needed no taxpayer subsidy. We would build the plant 100% at our expense, that we would operate it. We tried to overcome other county objections by saying that we would be happy to hire union employees to manage the sort station. We wanted to bolt on simply to the back of the sort station our pyrolysis equipment, have a small plot of land to operate off of, and we would be producing about a 50% return on our rubbish. In other words, we convert 100 tons of organic waste into 50 tons of biochar. And the biochar can be used for a variety of things. It can also be burned to create energy, although we feel the better use is for agricultural purposes. It can be a combination of the two. Biochar burns 70 times cleaner than coal. It does create the same heat. It's very similar to coal. Biochar is just carbon. It's created by a pyrolysis machine that has two very large screws in it. The garbage is put into one end after it's been chopped and reduced in size. All the metals have been taken out, glass has been taken out, and all the plastics that have been taken out, including the bleach bottles and other bottles that we don't pay high five on, and they don't get picked up in our recycling unless community persons are offered to do that on their own in a pre-sort before it hits the transfer stations. So our idea was to build the sort station. We got tremendous support from the county council at the meeting. No follow-up afterwards. We found it extremely difficult to get in to see the departments. They were all stuck on waste to energy. So then that brings me to another part of the story. Serving as a commissioner on the Energy Advisory Commission, I was working closely with Curtis Beck and other members of the HELCO personnel. When we proposed projects that were energy generation, they were rejected by HELCO, saying that they were already generating enough energy to supply the island and didn't really need additional wind farms. We offered a 25 meg solar, freestanding solar system for the island. They weren't interested in that. So we started to wonder, why is all this talk going on about waste to energy if the utility doesn't need the energy, if they're not unwilling to currently enter into agreements with people that want to put up $400 million wind projects or $50 million projects on this island, then what is the sense of continuing this discussion with waste to energy if we have nothing to do with the energy? Now, along with our plant, we were looking for sustainability. And I know that that's a big issue, and how we plan to do that is with other technologies. So our plant generates heat. We get methane from the products that we produce. We get hydrogen gases, and we get water and heat vapors. We recapture all those things, and we send them through scrubbing technology that then generates enough energy to run 45% of our operation. The additional 55% of the operation for the source station plan will be had through an energy park, a combination of vertical axis wind turbines, heat recovery technologies, freestanding solar, and we hope to make that not only to serve our purposes in generating enough electricity to run our plant and sustain the operation year after year, but to use it as an educational center for youth to show them just how important renewable energies and technologies can be to the Big Island. And of course, we wanted to take this model that we were creating here and take that around our state, wherever it might be applicable, to Kauai, to Maui, to Honolulu, to wherever it might fit in. And we wanted to build a model here in Hilo that would represent what we could do for the world. Making Hilo the #1 place where we would put our first plant and establish it here. It wasn't easy to convince the company to come all the way out to Hilo to do a plant and spend $60 million. I felt honored and privileged to be able to represent them. I'm now the director for Hawaii operations for Waste Refinement, and we're still being very persistent with this after 2 years of waiting. We're hoping that what we first went to the county council to accomplish was to open the process. We were not looking for the job the bid or the position. What we wanted to see our county do was open the process. It was similar to what we had when I did the original forms. We had seen 6 RFPs, and Barbara Bell had dismissed all 6 on grounds that they didn't meet criteria that was necessary at the time. Then, of course, we all went through Waste Management's proposal for their incinerator project at the tune of $125 million. We know that that didn't make it through either. So we're hoping to see something similar to what Maui has done in the last 6 months, which is open up an RFP process for technologies and companies that have an interest in finding solutions to this problem. So we're back at that again, and that's why we're hoping to meet with Ms. Todd and her new position at the department, and make her aware of what we're doing and what we're trying to get accomplished here, and know that you have options to closure. Lastly, as a part of closure of the landfill, a part of our proposal was to reduce the size of the landfill by mining it. Now, I don't know if you've been out to the landfill, you notice that each layer of refuse is covered with large rock, and that's unusual for landfills, but we use large rock. The idea was to mine the existing landfill, decrease the size, and extend its life so that we could get past the closure costs and some closure issues on an immediate. What we're looking for is to extend the life of the fill, recover the rock, which we take out with shakers. We offer to return that rock to the county so they could use it to pave all the roads within the landfill system. Then we would take out all the organics and process it and return about 10% of what we sort through back to the landfill. So that was a part of our process. So we just want you to know that there are companies like us out there that we've developed performance that it's not pie in the sky. These are the things that can be in reality for the Big Island. And they're well funded, and we don't need taxpayer money. We didn't want anything from taxpayer money. And we could reduce your tipping fees to $40 a ton, which we thought was a good incentive. And then we were planning to do revenue streams with the county. Anything recovered from the landfill or from the sort operations would be shared revenue streams for the county. So all the plastics that we removed would be sold and revenue shared with the county. All the metals that were removed, sold through the metal markets, and then shared revenue stream with the county. We wanted to turn what was been a negative for so many years into a real positive. So, now I brought you all a copy of our presentation so you can see. I brought you a sample of the biochar, and I think everything is pretty much spelled out in our presentation. So if it's all right, I'd like to give you a few. Is that all right? Yeah. Very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure.
Your
Nice to see
contact
you.
info? Yeah. Is your
I'll
contact
use this card.
info?
Very well. I know you're leaving, but you might find it interesting in your future work. I don't know which commission you're going to be going to next, or if you're getting away. Sure. You're very welcome. I have a juice copies of the juice.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you so much, and thank you for hearing me. Appreciate
Could I
it.
ask
Any
a
questions,
question,
please?
Questions?
Yeah, I'm curious, where, Mainland, are there other facilities similar to what you're proposing here? Has that been
This will
set
be
up
the
for
first
another
pilot
part of the
for
world?
us. It's been around since World War II. Pyrolysis is a machine that's basically used for making threads for carpet. So right now, there's machines that process 200 tons of fiber every day. And what we've done is modify that technology to, you have to understand, it's a series of screws and camshafts, similar to what an automobile has. The lobes interlope with one another. The screws force the material forward. The cams crush the material. It brings it to about 700 degrees. It's done in an oxygen-free environment, so there's no flame. So we're not incinerating, we're literally just transforming waste rubbish, organic material, back to its conform carbon. It's just pure carbon, and it's done with pressure. So yes, we have a demonstrator machine that's 2 tons per day, and we offer to bring out that prototype to the island, set it up so that members of the council, our mayor, members of your commission can take a look at the machine, see it working. I did bring you a sample so you can see what our end product is. This is biochar. This was waste, just ordinary solid municipal waste. Cornell University's done a tremendous amount of work with this biochar and its effects on agriculture. And I have a copy of the study I can read with the commission. So you could see what the benefits are of biochar. I'll leave this with the chair.
Mr. Nelson, wouldn't the components of the biochar itself, or at least the levels of nitrogen and whatnot, fluctuate somewhat, and therefore need to be adjusted for agricultural use depending on what it's used for?
Well, actually, the heat in the process transforms the product to purely organic biochar. There's no nitrogen in it.
Okay.
Biochar is basically a sequesterer of nutrients. So what it does is, when a farmer, we'll say one of our local farmers, fertilizes his field, we know how quickly the fertilizer disappears with heavy rains. When you add biochar to a soil mix, the nutrients that are broadcast on the surface are bound up into the biochar and literally acts as a time release for nutrients. So it slows the leaching process for fertilizers down for our farmers. It makes farming more affordable, it makes fertilizers last longer, it makes crops grow bigger.
Okay, so it's not a fertilizer, it's just what you said.
So it's just a reduction to pure carbon. So it's just like coal.
Okay.
So that's what we can transform solid waste into.
Any other questions?
Isn't there a place now on the island that actually produces some biochar?
Yeah, they're using a pit formula, like in the old charcoal days, you know, how you would make that charcoal. So they are, and distributing some of that to some local farmers, 85 cents a pound. We do it for $1,200 a ton. And we can do 50 tons a day about the biochar. That doesn't mean that we can't take it out to Epicale Point and burn it in Pu'uanahulu, or that we can't give it to HELCO to replace the use of some of the diesel components that they use. Energy generation, if they were open to that, but so far they have not been open to new technology.
There are no other countries or nations that are doing this type of...
We're in conversations with several places. I mean, we have meetings in Tonga with the Prime Minister and King of Tonga. We're also talking with Japan because they have radiation problems in soil and farming areas. And we know that we can bind the radiation in with the biochar. So we can literally clean and cleanse the soils. It's a tremendous thing.
Thank you.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, good. Just keep it in mind, and then if you have additional questions or want me to come back, I'd be happy to.
Thank you very much.
One more. Have you gone before the council, presented this again to the
Yeah,
council?
we did, and we got 9 thumbs up. Every councilman. Wonderful. Great.
I mean, recently or
No.
just this was several years ago?
September 20th,
Yeah.
2011.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to the commissioners, I'd like to encourage you that when you have questions, to ask the chair for recognition, just so that we have a clear record of who's speaking.
What's that? I'm sorry.
No, when you have questions or you'd like to speak, please address the chair and ask to be recognized.
I'm sorry.
Just to make the record clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Moving on to item number 5, appeals hearing. The appellant withdrew their appeal. We can move on to the director's report.
Article in the paper today. I just wanted to let you know that we are trying to negotiate DOT on reducing the cost because our analysis of the new costs seemed excessive. And it's the same basic analysis that Water Supply came to when they were handed and we've already paid in and they want additional money basically, based on Goodfellow Brothers. So we did have a meeting because DOT had contacted the county, and essentially they kind of agree that they think the costs are higher, but a lot of this is based on the contractor coming in with his numbers on what the redesign will cost. And we felt that we're just moving the lines from one side of the highway to the other side of the highway, so that we couldn't understand why it would trigger something that looked like almost 10% of the original costs for the contract. So that is, I think, the biggest issue here. And then, Bill 44 is still kind of in limbo, in that there were additional changes that Councilmember Kern was looking at, and we haven't really had any other significant movement on legislation from the council. Though I think what might be missing here is on Bill 79, my understanding is that they're going to amend it and no longer propose that the enforcement be with environmental management, but that instead enforcement be with the research and development, which actually does deal with some agricultural issues. And other than that, I really don't have anything to add to what we've got in the report.
Questions by commissioners on items on the director's report?
I have one now, sure.
Yes, John.
So two. So the Bill 79, this issue will be with R&D then?
Well, that's the intent of what I've heard from county council, is that there would be an amendment. When this originally came, the bill actually hit my desk too at the planning department, and Dora and I had some emails going back and forth. And basically I was saying that the department does not have the personnel or a budget or the types of positions that would do this type of work. We don't have inspectors, we don't have budgeting. It would also require testing. If you were going to go out and you suspected that you had GMO out in the field, it would require some testing. And we had no oversight over agricultural operations. And so when the council staff started looking at what department has anything to do with agriculture, the only department is research and development, because they did have an agricultural economic development position there. But they have primarily been a conduit for grant money that has come from the state. Right. And they go out, and they also have done education to farmers about insurance, grants, and funding that farmers can go after, but they have not really been any agency that's done enforcement, because typically your plans are through your natural resources conservation, soil and water groups that come out and do plans for you. If you have drainage issues, then you have to have plans that perhaps have to go through DPW when you're going to do grubbing and grading of more than 1 acre. So there really hasn't been any type of an enforcement staff or provision. So I think R&D will probably raise some concerns that if you're going to create additional duties, that you have to have some funding. At the very minimum, you're probably going to need additional staff, and you will need funding to do testing. Because as far as I know, having driven through acres and acres of corn and soybeans in the Great Plains one summer, you can't tell by looking at it. I mean, it just looked, I'm assuming that it was mostly GMO that I was looking at. But you can't tell by looking at the corn or the soybeans that it's been genetically modified. It looks just like, you know, every other corn plant I've ever seen. So I think those will be some of the concerns, and I don't know, obviously, what will happen at the council, but I'm sure that discussion will be had, because there isn't anything in the next year's budget that would create additional positions at either DEM or at RD, or provide the funding. And you're familiar with our department, the type of money that we use. We have contracts for water quality testing to check for turbidity, for how many suspended solids we have, to check for how much nitrogen in our outflow. But that's already a budget item, and it's specifically allotted already. To do any other testing, you would require additional money, and I don't know where it would come from.
The next question, John?
You answered my next question about the funding, so I'm good, thank you.
Tom?
I had a question. I still like to get the periodic updates on how the sort station is doing,
Okay.
percentage stuff, so if we could continue to get that.
Okay.
Because I guess I'm just personally not convinced that that's the way to go.
It's the
Yeah, I
last
think it's the
page.
last page.
Yeah, we're getting to you every month.
I think part of the problem having, I've been making an effort.
I guess I didn't turn to
I've
Excuse
been-
me, I
Up to
apologize.
May, but okay.
I've been making an effort to get out to all the baseyards, to go with the drivers when they go and haul, go out to Pu'uanahulu to take a look at the mulching operations there, go down to the sort station. I've been there several times, and I think that part of the problem is what I'm hearing, and this is a discussion that we're going to have with Greg, is that if you're really going to do any type of a decent sort operation, you need some better equipment in order to do it. And I think ultimately the emphasis is going to have to be, to some extent, on education, to get people to separate before they put it into the rubbish. Because when I was there, what we could see is like, you'd have a load come in and there's cardboard in it, but the cardboard's contaminated because it's been mixed with other stuff, because it's just a big dump truck. It's not a separate load of cardboard that's coming in, it's mixed with other rubbish. The separated cardboard is at the 2-bin recycling stations, but what's coming to the sort station is county offices are bringing their things in. And the county offices, we've been able to separate out, because the county offices tend to separate paper. So you'll have a load come and it's all paper. So that we can quickly put on the side. But the stuff that's coming in from the commercial operators, it's all mixed up based on wherever they went. And they don't collect separately either. We don't have a mechanism. So, one of the questions is going to have to be down the road, that if you're serious about this and you're serious about diversion, whether you're going to then require that haulers provide services to pick up recyclable materials. And that's where some of the movement has been in other counties. But one of the problems for us is we don't pick up rubbish. We operate transfer stations where people bring rubbish in. But we don't have, we are one of the few of the 4 counties, we don't do residential pickup, whereas the others do. So they've been able to implement programs where you've got different bins, and they have different pickup days. They'll have a pickup day for green waste. They'll have a pickup day for recyclables. They have a pickup day for large bulky items. But we don't have that, and we don't have a system in place that really encourages people to do more separation and diversion at their homes as well as businesses. So that's, I think, a discussion we have to have in terms of how do we go down that road to encourage it, because then you can divert more. Because the problem is if it's contaminated, your end user does not want the material. They can't use it, and they're just going to throw it away. It's going to end up in a landfill somewhere on the mainland. Mm-hmm. So that was one issue. One thing we noticed is that when people brought in stuff that was in a clear plastic bag, and you could identify what was in it, and that's what we saw with one of the county offices. All their paper was coming in clear plastic, and we could quickly identify that the entire load was paper, and the guys could just push that on the side. But stuff that was coming in your traditional black plastic bag, because the way it works right now, they don't go and rip the bags apart to see what's in it. So that ends up just going down the chute and ends up in the landfill. And we don't have a setup, we don't have like a traditional materials recovery facility where you'd have a system set up where you're taking it apart, running it down a conveyor belt where people can pick stuff out, or what Mr. Nelson was talking about, where you've got a system to float stuff up. So with what we have, they're doing the best they can do, but they've indicated that they think that if we're going to be more serious about this, we need to look at additional equipment and better equipment to do separation. But education and getting people to separate before they put it into the rubbish is going to be part of the mix too.
So that's an ongoing.
And the cost for this additional, perhaps more sophisticated equipment in the realm of...
We're going to have to look at that, but I think the analysis ultimately has to be not just what does it cost us to pick up equipment, not just what it costs us in employee wages. You have to look at whether you're avoiding other costs too as part of your analysis. How many years are you buying on a landfill? Because if you can postpone closure of the landfill, then you're postponing the closure costs. And closure costs are very high on a landfill because of your monitoring requirements. You're basically looking at, when you close the landfill and you've got costs for another 30 years, where you've got to monitor and you may have to have gas collection. There's all kinds of things. And a lot of those costs you can push down if you can keep your landfill open. Sometimes it's a little more expensive to do some of the recycling per ton than it is to landfill it, but the cost of landfills is very high. And so it's not just what does the equipment cost us. And then ultimately, I think, we're eventually going to run out of space at Hilo. And then that's the big issue. What do you do then? We may not have to face it for 10 or 12 years though, because we still have another face of the landfill that can have the sliver fill done on it. And we're taking a look at that right now, whether we could get some engineering studies done on that face and how much more time that buys us. But any extension, basically, you can extend the life if you do more diversion.
That's why, to me, the mining of the landfills is a part of a bigger picture that might be good, certainly good to.
Well, the only issue I'd have with the mining is whether Department of Health would let you reuse the rock for other things, or whether the rock would be considered contaminated, and therefore you couldn't use it. Because the problem that a lot of municipalities have had with things like H-Power, or even other methods where you end up with some ash residue, is that even though in some jurisdictions you can use it in road material, in the state of Hawaii, Department of Health is not letting you do it. And that's why H-Power ends up landfilling everything, because they haven't been able to get the Department of Health to allow them to use their residue, which can be used in road construction, because it is done in other parts of the world.
Go ahead, John.
What has been the roadblock for that, for the use?
I think it's because Department of Health is being extremely conservative, and I could understand why they're doing that, but at the same time, if you end up with a product that you could use, I would really like to see the Department of Health move in that direction rather than just putting everything in the landfill.
Makes a lot more sense.
It makes far more sense if there's something you can do with it. It's particularly when we import or have to bring in stuff or go mine stuff to use.
And I have one other just comment. I would like to request that in the future, at some point, if the department would advise the commission on what is the status of working with the Board of Water Supply and to try to get water and sewage.
We're meeting later this week. I think it's this week or next week. The mayor's calling a meeting, and we're going to be sitting down with Water Supply to talk about how we can implement the joint billing. And I think part of that discussion will be, whether there's a cost to water supply for doing that, and how we do that, how do we handle the personnel. And of course, a lot of this will be easier to work with than once we move to the new offices, because we'll physically be located with water supply at Waiakea Villas.
When is that?
In theory, it's supposed to be in September. They ran into, when they were pulling tile out, turned out the tile had asbestos embedded in it, so that has delayed the renovation of the building. But we were told that, I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that September, October, we can make the move. And what I think we're hoping for is to try and implement some type of a joint billing system by next January, if that's doable. It does require some tweaking of software, and there are some just issues in terms of implementation once you get an agreement. But it's to me, it's the way other jurisdictions have moved, and it's the way we need to go, because we've never been able to. We were able to have some success with our landfill by closing off access. So a lot of people who owed significant sums to the county have paid up their arrearages, because suddenly faced with, you're not going to be able to do business. Mm-hmm. And the problem we've had with sewer fees is that there was no mechanism to basically say, hey, if you don't pay your bill, you may not get water. And that's what city and county does, is because the billing is done together. If you don't pay that bill, then what happens is the water gets turned off, and then people end up paying the bill. And their fees are like 4 or 5 times what our fees are. Our fees are probably the cheapest fees in the entire state.
You're talking about Honolulu, right? City County Honolulu doesn't get.
And I know that our fees are cheaper than private fees that people in Kona have to pay to the facility that is run by Kamehameha Investment Corporation. And they pay significantly more. That was years ago, and I don't know what they've raised it to since then, but the last time I was an environmental manager, people in the private system were paying more per month than people pay for the county system. And we haven't raised the sewer fees in this county since 2002.
Yeah, if we could just get them collected now, that would be nice.
We're going to work on that.
Good, I appreciate it. I applaud you for doing so. Thank you.
Well, I have a few questions. With regard to the Hilo outfall repair, so the bid opening was scheduled for August 8th and was postponed. I just wanted to verify that date. It's Thursday, June 20th.
You're talking
under
wastewater, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Page 3, under G. And it said in anticipation of the Department of Army permit.
I haven't seen anything further come in from Dora. We just we're doing our annual reports, and we just signed a contract for water quality testing with Stephen Dollar for Pu'uanahulu, Papaiko, and Hilo. But on the upgrades to the outfall, I have not seen anything further than what's already in this report. Okay. But I'll check with Dora.
All right, and when, with regard to the inspection done for the Hilo Landfill by the Department of Health, any expected date for that report?
No, we have had one result of when they came out, they felt we weren't using enough daily cover. So we're running through almost 2 times as much gravel as we were previously, and so we're going to have to sit down, probably take a look at what kind of impact that has on our budget. We have put out an RF, an invitation for bid on tarp, so we can have additional tarp and better tarp, because to the extent that we can do the cover with our tarp on the landfill, and we reduce the amount of gravel we have to use. But, that's just part and parcel of operating a landfill.
Next group, please.
Go ahead, John.
Where's the aggregate coming from? Right next door?
Our current contract is with Yamada and Sons, so it's very close by where they actually do the quarrying. And then we get it from them, because their operations, they quarry kind of on one side, and then their actual operations are on the other side of facilities.
And did the bid for the scrap metal services go out on June 18th?
The bid went out. We have closed the bid. We did have something come in, and we are in the process of looking to see whether we can award that. We just signed off and sent out the 2-bid contract. That's going out. And the other thing, I think perhaps I'm not, we have been going back and forth with the state. You know, first they told us they weren't going to give us any money for high five. Then they said they would. They ended up not giving us any more than what they gave us. So we've been negotiating a supplemental based on the amount that they're giving us, which is instead of $760,000, they're giving us $483,000. So we have entered into negotiations with Business Services Hawaii. There will be a slight reduction in some hours, but basically we're going to be able to continue offering those services at all our transfer stations as they have been in the past. And so we're hustling as fast as we can to get those contracts executed and through the system.
And so this will be for an additional year? Or
for another year.
Another year.
And then after that, and anybody's guess as to whether we see any money from the state, because and frankly, the $483,000 came with additional reporting requirements over and when they used to give us $760,000, there were certain reporting requirements. They're giving us less money, but they've increased the amount of reporting that we have to do. So that's going to require some juggling of personnel, and also it requires more work on the part of Business Services Hawaii for less money.
So is the state taking over some additional responsibility then?
Not that I can see. It seems like they're asking us to take on additional responsibility, but giving us less money to do it. That's the way I read the grant.
And one last question regarding the Volcano Glenwood transfer station repairs. We were wondering if the funds have been released, the bonds that could.
We are doing, well, actually this morning, I think, some of our staff was at a CIP meeting, because now that the budget for next year has been approved, and we're looking at, you know, what we're going to fund. There was a meeting this morning where we were going to have representatives from both wastewater as well as solid waste meeting with finance to basically line up what our priorities were in terms of funding and trying to get allotments for those priorities. As you know, Waiakea, first there was a fire many, many years ago. There was the 2006 earthquake. Waiakea and Volcano are basically wood. And so they are probably in most danger of collapsing, like we had in Pahoa when we had the flood, and then Pahoa leapt to the top of the list because we actually had a street that collapsed and was unusual. And so Greg and I have been talking about it, and we are going to push as hard as we can to get those two going because of the number of people in services, and also the fact that if one of them goes down, then we really are behind the eight ball, because we do a lot of consolidation of Volcano. And Volcano is serving a growing population. I don't think that Glenwood could handle if something happened to Volcano. So that was this morning. I should be getting a report back from Dora and Glenn and Greg as to where we are in terms of funding for those two projects, as well as some of the wastewater projects. Though with wastewater, we tend to try and go after the state revolving fund monies as much as we can, because we can typically get it at a lower interest rate than even our bonds.
I have a question about the e-waste program. Your report says that DOH has offered limited funding. fiscal year 2014. Is that just to maintain the current level of the collection days, or will there be
Yeah, it would
changes?
be the same amount that they've given us.
Any increase in
Well,
education or outreach? I'll tell you a story about my,
okay.
so the last collection day in Waiakea, I had a 10-year-old TV.
Mhm.
Back in the days when they weighed 250 pounds. So I took it there. There were 2 pallets, not even full,
Mhm.
1 layer of TV sets, not stacked. I got my TV set onto the pallet. This was late on Saturday. And then I asked one of the workers, I said, so, thinking optimistically, have you already moved some of the stuff away? He said, no. I said, so that's all that came in today? And he said, no, actually, that's a month. When people put things, electronic down beside the chute, they move them to a pallet. If they can, they intercept people who are about to throw a TV down the chute. Couldn't have been 20 items in a month. It just,
We've had
people
some
are doing it.
questions.
I don't know how we, get people to realize. But I don't know what facility could be added. I mean, you can't have an open container where people heave TVs in because there's mercury and all sorts of stuff.
Well, it's the same thing like when we have to separate, white goods, like, we're talking about whether we need better signage, because we don't want refrigerators mixed with other white goods, because the refrigerators have to be dealt with separately because of the freon. And e-waste, but some of it I really think is more of an educational thing is, but I think people want to, but if it's only, you can't do it every day that you go to the dump and you have to wait for certain events and something's happening. I don't know whether it's going down the chutes or what's happening to it, or it's just piling up at people's houses. But
Since the guys are actually moving the stuff aside now, no matter what day it comes in on,
that's not a whole lot.
does it make sense to tell the public you can only bring it on one day a month?
We'll have to look at that, but typically, you need a secure place to be able to put it. It's a possibility that maybe we could look at the sort station as a place where people could take their stuff. Because we do have a place where we could store it there. We'll have to look at other alternatives, and I know that Greg and Dora are open to any suggestions that you might want to share.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, commissioners, for director? If not,
I do have one of those, yeah.
yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to request if there's any way that you can, involve us more to help you, that I think we're willing, to try to do that. So we'd like to have a good dialogue with you and relationship, and so I encourage you to ask us if we can. Thank you.
I have one more comment. Just you mentioned the effort to make the chutes a little bit harder to stand on.
Yes.
It's really working. I mean,
Well, we have a few that we still need to. Green waste at Waiakea is a concern.
yeah, Waimea has one that's been fixed and one that hasn't, and the difference is dramatic. Although the guys tell me they still see people standing on the new one, but
Yeah, well, we have to, because people will still do things that you don't think are safe, and they should know it's not safe.
but it's a good effort for the most part. It's really
Yeah,
working.
we're working on that, because it's always, no matter how much I think it's the other person's negligence. Anytime somebody gets hurt on a county facility, if they fall into the chute, we're going to get sued. So to the extent that we make it harder, it saves us money in the long run.
Any other comments from commissioners or questions? If not, we'll move on to commissioner member district update reports. Trina.
There were a couple of researchers who came to talk to me about the GMO bill, but I guess it's moved now.
Right.
Yeah. So that was, they were some farmers and papaya farmers, and ones who were pro-GMO, actually. So that was interesting. They left me a bunch of research too, so anyway.
We'll pass it on to them.
Yeah, I'll pass it on. Right.
Tom?
I don't have any important stuff.
Just with regard to my district, again, it was the volcano, transfer station, Glenwood transfer station. Just wondering when, funds will be allocated and when the design plan will be finished, and those were just the questions that they had. Sure.
I have nothing to report. I've not been able to meet with my council person. So I guess it's busy with GMOs.
John?
Yeah, following up on last month or the month before last, I did meet with Councilmember Ilagan after our last meeting regarding the mulch, the desire for his constituents to have mulch delivered to Altapuna. And he identified several of the obstacles that are keeping him from doing that. And he said he'd just continue working on it. Now that Bobby Jean is on board, if you haven't heard from him, I'm sure you'll hear from him soon regarding that. And it's out of my district, but I don't know, for some reason he contacted me.
I might mention that one possibility of reducing the cost of gravel on the landfill would be to use mulch.
Mulch, yeah.
And we've also had a request from Parks and Recreation because their BMX track at the drag strip needs to have some work done on it, and they've asked for mulch to go and improve that facility too. The problem we have is that in Hilo there's a huge demand, and on the other side of the island it's piling up. If you've been to Pu'uanahulu, it's rows and rows, and actually the quality is better at Pu'uanahulu because it's sitting there and it's having more time to be great. The quality is beautiful, but nobody wants to drive out there to pick it up. So we're going to be looking at what we can do about that, and, because we do want to get it out and out of the facility. But
This Councilman Ilagan called you about this?
no, he has not.
Yeah, his whole thing was to utilize some empty county trucks that were coming back out to his district from the landfill, and then possibly setting up some kind of distribution point out near the farmers market area. So, like I said, he and I discussed some of the obstacles, and I think realistically they can be tackled. But anyway, you might be hearing from me.
Comment to that.
Go ahead, Tom.
Follow up on what you were saying, John. I think one of the problems was the potential of transferring fire ants, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be, if you could get over that hurdle, that might make a lot of difference.
Yeah.
They've got kind of nasty in Como.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get mulch for that reason. I don't have them. Thank goodness I don't know.
Did you say that was Ilagan that you had?
Yeah, Ilagan.
Oh, okay.
Bruce? Anything? Okay. Move on to unfinished business. Discussion of South Hilo Sanitary Landfill Closure Plan and alternatives following closure. Any comments, questions, suggestions, or updates? Apart from what you'd already mentioned. BJ.
No, we are very preliminarily looking at alternatives. But, the biggest thing is that if we can engineer that other phase, then that is another 10 to 12 years based on the amount of space we think we have available. And given the history of procurement in this county as well as in others, in order to plan for an alternative, you probably need that additional time, because I have seen multiple failed RFPs. And, going back to Yamashiro in 2000, when we were ready to award a contract, and he ended up leaving it for Mayor Kim, and Mayor Kim decided not to execute the contract. And so it's just, you can go through the whole process and then still not end up with something that either the council or an administration is willing to go with. So I think we need some time, and so that's going to be my focus, is trying to make sure that we can extend the life of the landfill while we start probably looking at another RFP, or at least an RFI, which would be a request for information, where people, it's a two-step process basically. Before you go out for an RFP, you invite different technologies to present information to you, and then you can use that information to then design your RFP based on what technology is out there and what is scalable for the amount of trash that we have. And right now, we don't have 200 tons a day in here.
For waste.
More, for anything, it's about 150 tons, because the tonnages have gone down. Pu'uanahulu is, between 200 to 300, and one time they were topping 400 tons a day. And so the tonnages have gone down significantly with the economic downturn. So that between Pu'uanahulu and Hilo, you're basically talking about maybe a total of 419 tons a day going into the two landfills. And, for a lot of technologies, you're usually looking at a minimum of 200. And for scalability, a lot of them are looking more at 500 tons a day. So there's even been, very tentative discussions from people in Honolulu about whether taking trash to Honolulu to burn at H-Power is an alternative. So I think we need to be open to multiple options, except I don't want to barge it to the Pacific Northwest.
Good. That just doesn't make sense to me.
It didn't make sense when I was at environmental management in the past. We had a lot of political pressure back then to sign a contract to barge the trash to the mainland. And we kept saying, Barbara Bell before me, and when I was there, we kept saying, this is not ready. It doesn't look like they have all of their permits. We don't think this is a good idea. And we resisted a lot of pressure from council members to go and execute a contract to barge. And Honolulu went ahead and did one, and they ended up having a year's worth of trash sitting in a warehouse, and ended up having to rip everything apart and take it to H-Power, because they never did get all their permits to barge it. So I love to hear from people. I have an open mind, but I basically want to see if something is proven and operating and can deal with the amount of trash that we have. It has to be something that's consistent with the amount of trash we have. Something that's going to cost so much that you'll never get it approved, or something that can't handle the amount that we have.
So really the main obstacle you see is the consistency of the tonnage needed for waste energy?
My experience in the past when I dealt with this is that in order to reach a price that is affordable to a municipality, you basically have to deal with more rubbish. And that's a conventional waste to energy type of a facility. There are other technologies that are out there that say they can deal with less. Usually the problem when you do an analysis of most technologies is that are they using municipal solid waste, or are they doing something that is a more uniform feedstock? Because if you're doing something and your municipal feedstock, the feedstock in is, or it's corn cobs, or it's chicken parts, because I think Tyson had been trying to do something.
You're talking about a uniform feedstock, but with municipal solid waste, there's all different kinds of things, different sizes,
different makeup to it, and so it usually requires different machinery. And so what we've found in the past is that scaling up from a demonstration model that's usually using a uniform feedstock to try and scale it up to do something with municipal solid waste, there have always been technical challenges, and then it has started getting expensive. So I would want to see if somebody had a track record and how much tonnage of municipal solid waste they were actually dealing with. And it's not that there aren't technologies out there doing it, but a lot of them require pre-sorting. And so, you know, and also to some extent, you have to have a certain amount of control over the rubbish. And if we go down that road, and you know that there have been proposals by someone who has like the private waste hauling on the Tacoma side to do his own facility. So there's a question of whether he controls his rubbish or whether the county controls his rubbish. So those are all questions that we're going to have to deal with as we look at options. And I suspect that if we do an RFI that we will have enough proposals come in that we'll have complete fund sorting through all of them. And then the question is whether we have enough tonnage to make something workable. And despite the fact that a lot of people will come and say it's not going to cost you anything, they're not counting the tipping fee. And we also found that my experience with Wheelabrator and Waste Energy was that their initial projections on what it would cost to build something were based on materials and labor costs and permitting on the mainland. When they actually looked at materials and labor and the permit process in Hawaii, we ended up going from an initial estimate of $40 to $60 million to 125. It became much more expensive than they initially thought. And it had to do with, to some extent, available labor pool, because some of the labor was going to have to be imported, and then you were going to have to pay per diem for them. And so they found that it was much more expensive than building a facility on the mainland, comparable facility. It just is more expensive to do it here. So that was one of the lessons learned from the whole waste to energy experience before, is that unless you have dealt with those types of construction costs in Hawaii, you frequently underestimate what it will cost you to build a facility here.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
One comment. Did your department have communications with Maui, for instance, were they doing their, you know, the RFPs for the energy thing? Do they provide information?
I don't think there was a whole lot of exchange. We're going to be reaching out to them. I've in the past, I think we had a lot more.
We have the Maui.
You have the Maui stuff? Yeah. But I'm talking about the process. I know we have the RFP. It's just whether
Continuous
we're,
dialogue.
no,
Yeah.
I don't believe we had a continuous dialogue. We've been, since I've been on board, we've been discussing stuff with the people who run HCAR and some of city and county's issues. And so we're hoping to follow that up and talk to Maui and also talk to Kauai, because Kauai needs some interesting legislation.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
I just had a question. So do you see any possibilities with what Richard presented?
Well, I told Richard that the door is open. You know, I basically said that I was going to come into the job with an open mind, and people want to come in, I will make the time for them to talk to me and do a presentation. And we'll see, you know, what's out there. But I have to admit that based on my experience before, when somebody gives me a number that this is what it's going to cost, I don't necessarily believe, because even the barging guys gave us one number, and by the time they executed a contract with city and county, it was significantly more expensive than what they had made representations. They had basically said it's going to be cheaper than what you're doing right now. By the time they executed with city and county, it was more expensive than what we were doing here. And so it's that guys come in and they haven't fully penciled it out. They haven't done a full analysis of, because it takes money to do a real analysis. Wheelabrator probably expended anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million to come out and do the engineering studies, to come and look at what it would take to hook up to HELCO, what the actual site looked like, what would construction cost here, and it's a huge expenditure of their capital. And the difficulty is, if people don't think you're going to end up with a contract that you can sign, there are a lot of people who will not put in a proposal or a bid that you put out there because they're going to question whether the expenditure of money. And so what happened last time is Covanta, who was the operator of H-Power, had some real concerns about whether we would actually be able to get a contract signed, and they chose to not do the full analysis like Wheelabrator did, because it costs. So in many jurisdictions, what they do is they actually subsidize the cost of people putting in a bid. They pay them money to help subsidize. It doesn't fully compensate them, but they actually give them $300,000 because they know that the cost is $500,000 or more to do all the workup. So I've seen that occur. And that's your earnest money. It shows that you're actually committed. And without that kind of a commitment, I don't know how many people, because we're a small market, compared to anywhere on the mainland where you've got rubbish that can come in from multiple municipalities, not to mention multiple states, the amount of trash that we're dealing with, there's a question of how many serious proposals that have fully thought out, fully vetted what their costs are, will actually submit a proposal to you. Because, and especially if you're only dealing with the amount of trash we have in Hilo. At 150 tons, that's small potatoes for a lot of these guys. So the question is when somebody like Richard comes, is that I'm going to be asking is, have you done municipal solid waste? Not have you done other stuff. I want to know where you're doing municipal solid waste and how long you've been operating. And for me, that's the bottom line question. Don't come and tell me you're doing wood chips, because I've seen proposals that did a lot of wood chips. And when they ramped up from 4 tons a day, which the demonstration model worked great, and it would be some study done by a university. And then when they tried to ramp up to 200 tons a day, it never worked. They couldn't do the engineering. And so I am open-minded. People can come in and do presentations, but they've got to do their homework, and I'm going to have to do mine, and my staff's going to have to do their homework. Because you don't want to invest or commit to something that's going to put you on the hook for $50 million or $60 million potentially, because you've got to enter a contract. Nobody's going to come and build a facility, even if it's their dime. They want some kind of a contract. And we've seen experiences in other municipalities where you've committed to something, and then that contract price gets renegotiated and it becomes significantly higher than what you entered into, because their costs end up becoming much higher than they thought they would. So you want to be cautious before you make a 20 or 30-year commitment to a technology that it has fully been vetted and that you know it's doable and that we're not going to go into a black hole monetarily.
Next, proposed sewer and solid waste Hawaii County code changes to address existing and minimize, prevent future delinquencies. Any comments, questions? suggestions or information you and commissioners?
I don't know that we need to really do amendments to the sewer code per se. I think there's enough flexibility. The biggest issues with waivers and exemptions really come up in a unique set of circumstances in Hawaiian homes, where one, we have an agreement that we saved $25 million by taking our lines through Hawaiian homestead land. And as part of that agreement, wherever that line was, the people along that line, we signed an agreement with DHHL that they don't have to hook up or pay fees. The reality is DOH makes them hook up, but they're not required to pay fees. But as part of the improvements in Hawaiian homesteads, they also put in additional roads. And the roads ended up being on the back side of people's lots. And suddenly, under our code, those lots became quote-unquote accessible, even though the house was physically located on an entirely separate road. And so those are unique circumstances, and that's changing because those lots are gradually getting subdivided. So I don't know that we need to do changes there. But, you know, obviously, council members may have different ideas. We have a meeting coming up with Councilmember Onishi, who is looking at some possible proposals. He has not introduced anything yet. He wants to meet with us first to discuss some proposals and exemptions. But I'm hesitant to do anything that potentially could put us in violation of federal requirements. Because we've had EPA grant money and it came with requirements that you have to follow certain federal guidelines in terms of making people hook up. So you're very limited inside. We don't want to do something that puts us in violation of federal rules and regulations.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that aspect of this.
Any
That's going to
comments,
affect that
John
federal.
or Bruce, suggestions?
Nope.
Sure. Okay. New business. Update and discussion of recycling in the State Department of Education contracts for public schools. I did speak with Senator Ruderman again, and we could try again for the next session. It didn't happen this past session, so we will try again and see if he can put it on his agenda for this upcoming session. I think when we last spoke with Dora, there were 3 schools that the department, the other county departments was working with on a recycling contract and expanding their recycling contract with Department of Education. So that might be something in the future. I don't know if you're aware of that, BJ.
Okay, I will ask them about that.
Okay.
You don't know what schools, huh?
It's in one of our past minutes, actually. Dora mentioned that. Because I think that's also one of the big issues or an issue for solid waste. And Linda Peters, I think that's something that's very important to her as well. So we were trying to do what we could to help move that forward, which is why I was speaking at the Senate level as well to try and move our senators in that direction. Any other comments on that? Future agenda items. Sewer connection waiver exemption policy update to include expected date of implementation. Do you still want that as a future agenda item? Just keep it there, or?
I'll probably have some more report about the water supply situation.
Okay. Okay.
After this next meeting with the mayor and Irina.
Okay, and discussion of the decision-making process and timeline on reevaluation of county solid waste programs and direction. So it, you can keep that moving since those discussions are ongoing and current.
We're
developing the plan.
We're looking at it, right.
So both of us need to be kept on future agenda, but
Yeah.
not put into
Yeah.
the.
But not necessarily put in.
Okay.
Any other other suggestions for future agenda items?
Just related to that, I have a question just about the timeline for the update of the integrated solid waste management plan. Is that a 5-year cycle?
It used to be 5 years, the state amended the law to make it 10 years.
Yes, okay.
Any other agenda items commissioners would like to see? Okay. Well, with that, our next meeting is July 31st in Kona. Before we adjourn, any other questions, comments by commissioners? Yes,
Just
John.
wanted to welcome again, Bobby Jean, and kind of echo what was said earlier, that we're here to help and we want to help, so just let us know.
So if you need us for any field trips.
You know, well, it might be time for another tour of the trash.
Yeah,
That would be
there we go.
good.
Just have to find the money.
So thanks, Bobby Jean.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. With that, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
All right.
My wife has my, she forgot her.